I think a really great way to start this off, and I know you have amazing stories. Some I think you even said you forgot, right? Because there's so
Oh,
many
yeah,
experiences that
that's
you and
right.
Donna have kind of gone through. But
Mm,
could you start us off
mhm.
for those that don't know you as well with just your background and kind of where you come from?
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in Washington, DC, and, in a pretty religious family, and so part of that dynamic was which is part of the story for me is that, we weren't allowed to go to movies or listen to rock music and that kind of thing. And so by the time I was 14, I was really interested in why we couldn't go to movies. So
Mm,
I
mm,
decided to go, go to a movie, sneak into a movie theater. So I
mm.
did that. I went into this movie theater, had no idea what was playing, and snuck in there. Felt really weird. Felt really guilty. And the movie that ends up playing is the this is when I was 14, eighth grade, was the movie Serpico, starring Al Pacino. So it's the real life story of police officer Frank Serpico,
Mm.
who takes on the police department. He won't be part of corruption and all of this. And it's a really powerful, moving story. And so I'm watching this movie, which actually begins with him being shot at the end of the movie by his own squad. And anyway, so I'm watching this movie occur, and I'm having this like deep, like spiritual experience.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it because I didn't, I'd kind of grown up in the church, but I'd never felt anything like this.
Mm.
And so I'm watching the movie, watching the character, and I'm very moved by him. And I just start to cry.
Uh,
And this is what art and theater can do to a person, and beauty. And I knew that in some way, God or someone was communicating to me that this movie represented something about my future.
mm,
I just knew.
mm.
I cried, and
Wow.
through the movie. And then when it was over, I because of my church culture, when you feel some kind of conviction or you need to make a decision, you have to go forward because God, I guess, doesn't know what's going on unless you go forward. So I
That's
went
right.
forward at the end
He
of the.
can't see you unless
That's
you're
right.
in
That's
front of
right.
him,
It's
right?
like if you were in the back, it doesn't count.
That's right.
So I go forward. Everyone's leaving the theater. I go forward, actually up onto the little stage, and I just stand up on the little stage crying.
Mm,
And I'm looking back at the projection booth up there in the light, and I just say out loud to God, I mean, or whatever that was, this is what this is me. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be a police officer.
mm,
And so that was 14. So I mean, I never changed my mind. I
uh,
from eighth grade to when I graduated from university, I went straight into the police academy. So um, that sense of identity that I really didn't understand, but it drove me. And what it did for me was it gave me a way to make decisions from eighth grade until I was
yeah.
23.
Wow.
Just not to not do things, but to, like, if I'm gonna play sports, or how does this contribute to me one day being a police officer?
Mm,
So it was really powerful and helpful to me. So met my wife in university. Had a couple of great individuals in my life, and I came to faith when really understanding Jesus when in my senior year, going into my senior year, had a wrestling accident, and the
mm,
nurse that came in to work with me after the surgery is the first person who really communicated Christ to me in a way that made sense. And what
mm,
she kept saying to me was, she kept saying to me, your body's going to get well, because I was afraid I couldn't pass a police physical. So my
yeah.
whole dream was devastated
Yeah.
by this injury, physical injury. And she kept saying to me, that injury will heal. The thing that is going to hurt you is your anger and your bitterness in your heart. And she said, let me help you with that. And I was so mad at her. I just cussed her out. And she left the room, and she was leaving. She looked back at me and she said, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And each day she came back with this same sort of spirit of love, that no
Mm,
matter what, and I was so rude to her and mean and abusive, and she just overcame my hostility with her love. And
mm,
I realized then that that she was more than just a physical therapist or a nurse, because there was
mm,
lots of great healthcare professionals in that hospital, but nobody was doing what she was a healer. She was healing me at a deep level. And so when I
mm,
left the hospital, she didn't think she had any impact on me at all. I've never been able to find her and thank her ever.
mm.
I've looked. we've had the FBI look for her.
I
Can't
was
find
gonna
her. I
say,
don't
yeah,
know.
you've got some resources.
Yeah,
to
I
be
know.
able to
We pulled all
find
the
out.
resources. I've never been able to find her. But when I left there, I prayed for like the first time I think I really understood prayer. And I said to God, can you make me a police officer like she's a nurse? That's the only way I knew how to say it. Like whatever she's bringing to her vocation is more than her vocation. If I could, go into crime scenes and domestic disputes with that kind of love
Mm.
against fear and hostility, that would be remarkable. But I don't know how to become like her. So could you teach me how to become like her? And the only way I ever became like her was by finding people that were like that. So it was always this modeling discipleship relationship, even if the person wasn't, discipling me in particular, just what they were doing with me or alongside me, I could see it. Like this person. So the next person I met was when I was in college, the guy that coached the wrestling, university wrestling. He was like that. He was number 2 in the nation.
Mm.
But wrestling wasn't his thing. He was great at it, but he knew how to teach a person how to meditate in the scriptures. It was like wild. And so he taught us that if you understand how to meditate and contemplate in the scriptures, you were better on a wrestling mat because you're predicting and thinking and overcoming mistakes. And it was just really cool. So him, and then into the police department. And so went into the police department and got the opportunity over the next 5 years in the police department to try and do what I felt like God had been instilling in me. So my question to God was, through the police academy, graduate as high as you can, be the best you can, and then come out on the street. And then when you get in situations where your training works to a certain level, but then there's this other level, it's like, wow, nobody trained me for this. I couldn't like look it up in the Bible. So I just realized that the people in the scripture, when they had a question or didn't know what to do, they would inquire of God, and God would somehow communicate to them. And so that's what I started to try to do as a police officer in my vocation. And it was trial and error, but I really started to develop a capacity to hear God in the way that God communicates to me, which is unique to all individuals. There's no formula to it. Trust me. So I would just carry a notebook, and I would be in these situations, and I would ask God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? Like, I don't know, like what is happening here that I don't know? And I just developed the capacity. We call it the free flow of thoughts that flow through your mind when you fix your eyes on Jesus and ask him a question.
Yeah.
And just write it down, write down. And I would have these ideas, and they would make sense sort of. And I would just try them. And because the Hebrew word obedience means to hear and respond.
Yeah.
And obedience is greater than sacrifice. So I felt like the Lord was saying to me, I don't need you to sacrifice. I need you to hear what I say and do what I say. And so I just practiced doing that. And I was officer of the year, and I made detective and broke these cases. And I loved it. I just was so in love with it. And I realized that I was being what I saw in the movie all those years before. And then in my 5th year, get a phone call one night at my house from these individuals that want me to meet them that night, go to meet them outside of DC. And it's a operations guy from the CIA and these 2 individuals. And then they have all my casework for 5 years. And the question was, how are you doing what you're doing in these cases? And can you articulate it? And do you have a process? And I said, you're not going to like my process. And the guy said, I don't care. And I love that he said this. He said, we don't care what the process is. We see the result, which is Jesus saying, they know you by your fruit.
Yeah.
You can talk all day long. You can brag
which, by the way, thanks for saying that, because nowadays people are like, well, the fruit is being nice. And the fruit is like, shoving apologetics down people's throat, And so I love the results, right? Like,
do they have a trench coat on?
Yeah.
He was, it's interesting. It's interesting. I thought I was getting in trouble for something because like they don't call you at 10 o'clock at night. Right. And it was a magistrate that called me, which is really weird. And he says, meet me at this bar. So I go to this bar. And in the back, we walk in and go into the back booth in the back corner, and there's this guy, white shirt, tie, smoking a cigarette. He's drinking scotch, and he's back there, and he's just brooding kind of. And I'm like, wow, he's either internal affairs or some kind of government person. And we sit down, and he's got I see my case folder in front of him, like, oh my gosh, what are they investigating? Because I did a lot of things.
Yeah,
I got suspended a couple of times for trying things that didn't work.
you're like House, but
yeah,
like,
I was gonna say
CIA,
the police
or
version
police
of House.
yeah.
That's right.
For those who don't know what that is, but watch the show.
We know. And so he was very direct and not emotional, and he was very skeptical of the whole thing. The magistrate I had worked with on a bunch of cases, and I realized that the magistrate was the recruiter, and this is the guy. He was saying, come meet this cop. I think he's the kind of person we're looking for this scenario. So it was like being in a movie, but the guy would just smoke and drink, and he was like, tell me about this case. Tell me about this case. And I would explain it to him, and he would say, how did you decide? How did you know to do that? And I would say, well, I would pray and ask God for direction, and he would like roll his eyes, but he kept getting to the closure of the case, and he was like, yeah, but that did work. And so we did that for hours through these cases, and then finally he says, can you do this in another country? And I had never thought about it, but I thought, are people different in another country? Like, is it, if they're human, I'm pretty sure this would work. And I said, I think so. And then he gave me an actual case they were working, and he said, we can't resolve this case, and so we're looking for someone that we can just drop in there. Do you think what would you do in this scenario? And it was really interesting. I just sat there and I did exactly what I did when I was a cop. I just said, God, in this case, he just gave me, these guys know what they're doing. They're professionals, but what is it that they don't know that I don't know that you would tell me right now so I could say it to them? And I just had an idea. Yeah. And I said, this is what I would do. And I laid it out for him. And he took a napkin and he wrote down a salary amount, and he slid it across from me. He said, would that get you? And I looked at it, and it took me a while. I was like, wow, that's a lot more than what a cop makes. And I said, yeah, that'll get me, but not that. The case will get me. The challenge will get me. And so that night, my whole life changed. And that's like God saying, get ready, consecrate yourselves, because tomorrow I'm doing a new thing. Yeah. And as a believer, you need to be ready for that when he does that, because he's going to do it.
Did you always have this like inherent trust that like, hey, like this is God's voice, this is what he wants me to do? Because I think somebody hearing this, whether they're a believer or not, they're kind of going like, I can't hear from God. Like, what does that mean? Is that him or pizza I ate last night? I don't know.
I think everything. The thing I love about Scripture and faith and all of that is it's not about, is a person a Christian or a non-Christian? It's not about, is it religious or non-religious, or religious or secular? It's about, is it true or false? That's that's the issue when you're reading the Scriptures. It's not like, you couldn't ask Moses, are you a Christian or non-Christian? Are you biblical or non-biblical? They wouldn't even know what you're talking about. It's like, no, this is true and this is false. So I love it, because when I'm talking to people that aren't from a faith tradition, I'm still talking about stuff they understand, because I'm saying this is just what's true, isn't it? And so what's true in the world is everything's a process. Yeah. Everything. And it starts at the lowest level, and you work. Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. That's what it says. He learned obedience through what he suffered. And so for me, these processes are like, and I give this example all the time when I was about hearing God, like, what does God sound like? And how do you know it's you and not, or God and not you? And I said, you just practice. You just practice, and train, because it's a distinct voice. We're trapped by using the word hear and voice. It's like a feeling, an idea, a sensation, a picture in your mind. It's all different things. We worked with all different kinds of people, and the way they sense God. One guy that we worked with in Jordan, it was just a Bible verse would come to his mind, just a reference. That's just the way he did it. So my training officer, when in my first year, he said to me one time, it was like 2 weeks. And he said, listen, that police radio in this cruiser is your lifeline to everything. And you have got to hear everything that they say related only to you, because it's a huge department and they're talking to all kinds of different units. You have to hear them when they say 510. That's your unit number. Well, there's 110, 210, 310, 410, 510, 610, 710, 810, 910. And then there's 520 and 530 and then you're in all this stuff going on. And he said, you've got to hear when they call 510 or when you need to talk to them. And you have to talk calm and you can't scream. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And he said, they've already called you 3 times. So what that meant to me was, if you put me on a polygraph and said, did they call you 3 times? I would say, no, they didn't. And I'd be telling the truth.
Yeah.
And be completely wrong. Like, you have to understand that you can think you're telling the truth and be completely wrong. And so then I had to learn. I mean, I had to put my head down by the radio and go like, oh, they said, they 510, they said it. And then he said, now can you drive and do that? And you just practice listening until like today. Man, if you say the number 510, I'll wake out of a dead sleep. Like, I can't get that identity out of my mind anymore.
Yeah.
And so no matter what's happening, I can be, a long way away from my cruiser or whatever and hear 510. Just like, so if that's what we have to do in sort of normal life, it's the same with hearing the voice of God.
Yeah.
It's like, what does he call you? Like, first of all, what does he call you? He's not going to call you this, this, and this. The world calls you that. The enemy calls you that. And you answer to that all the time.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's so impactful because like up until a certain point, until the injury, your goal and purpose and identity was, hey, like be a cop, be a cop, be a cop.
Right.
But then as soon as you had that interaction with that nurse and then that wrestling coach, it became not about that, but it actually became more about seeking truth.
Right.
Because the intrigue became, okay, like how did that person show up versus, because that person who was a nurse, like, to you, like that's such a small part of her life and how she showed up.
Yeah.
Right. Like her heart and her mind and her spirit was what kind of enamored you.
Yes.
You're like, wow, like this. What is this? What is that stuff?
Right. Yeah.
And so I love how that was kind of the foundational, chronologically, right? Foundational of like, hey, this is how I'm hearing. This is how I'm doing these cases.
Yes.
This is how I got recruited by you guys. And all this stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the value of people that you meet in your life. It's the value of our impact. Like because that nurse, I don't even know her name. I knew she was 27, single mom from West Virginia that worked her way through nursing school. That's all I've ever known about her. And if I could have found her, I wanted to tell her, that smart aleck, nasty mouthed kid, not only did you affect me, you affected Muslims all over the world, that kind of thing. She would not know that.
Right.
And so I think of being in heaven one day,
right.
When God calls her name and, thousands of Muslims stand up and clap, like she would have no idea that that's what happened.
Isn't it crazy that she didn't force you into some kind of Bible study?
Nope.
She didn't invite you to her church. She didn't invite to some kind of a church function.
Right.
It was just, collectively, what would you say? An hour interaction with her, maybe here and there?
Overall, maybe an hour where I actually listened to what she said. And what she was saying, that's just such a good point because I grew up in the church. I was mad at her because I thought she was going to do the Jesus thing on me. And she did do it, but she did it in such a different way. It was like Jesus himself actually doing it rather than someone talking about Jesus. And and what she was doing was she was giving me a way to get rid of the anger in my life. She wasn't talking about going to church or a Bible study. She was saying, I want to help you be free of what's really going to ruin you. And so I was having this discussion the other day with these guys, and they were saying, like when you're going inside of a terrorist organization or whatever, like what you're in with them. I said it's the same in with any person. If you walk in a room and say to the people, I'm here to take away whatever is you're most afraid of, they're going to listen to what you say. At least they're going to listen.
Yeah.
But if you go in there like, I'm going to here to make sure you start attending this, you forget it.
Right.
Forget it. So that's really important to learn. And I'm grateful that for her and how she did that with me, of course, and the wrestling coach, and then other people in my life. And there's not a lot of people that do that. And so when they are there, they stand out dramatically. And they tend to be not big attention seekers. They tend to be pretty quiet. And so by the time I got to, the CIA guy, recruitment guy, I felt like I was probably doing to him what the nurse did to me and what the wrestling coach did to me. I felt like the position was reversed. And what I actually said to him is like, the reason that you guys are going to keep failing in what you're doing is not because you don't have the resources and all that. It's because you're doing it out of fear. Which made him mad, which meant I was right. And I said, if we took the fear out of the situation, this would work. And then he says, you have a job.
Yeah. That's so powerful because it happens in police culture, right? It happens, but I also have seen it happen so much within like corporate culture.
Oh yeah.
Talk about a culture that's just layered by fear, right? Of just if I don't follow this process, I get fired, and
Right.
like if I'm not this, then my parents don't approve of me, right? Like all this stuff,
Yeah.
So for you, I mean, how has it that you have helped people find freedom to be then free, right?
Yeah.
Like free from that stuff, right?
Mhm.
And I'm just curious how you did, especially in the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like here in the United States.
Hmm. Yeah. So what I assume, and again, this is just, I feel like you have these experiences in your life, and if you'll truth tell, which is a big part of this, and it's maybe the most difficult part, is learning how to tell the truth. So not that people lie, it's that they don't know what the truth actually is. And you have to work to understand what's actually true about yourself, especially. Most humans don't even know what they really believe. They say things, but they don't live like what they say.
Mm.
And if you really pushed them on something, that isn't really what they believe. So, I mean, a lot of people would say, well, I believe I'm going to heaven when I die. I'm like, well, then let's go to Yemen together. And then they're like, no, because they're not quite that sure, but it's this.
Mm.
So then you didn't really tell the truth when you said that.
Mm-hmm.
So your experiential truth is what sets all humans free. So if you can get anyone to start truth telling at any level, you're on the way to redemption and transformation.
Mm.
So
Oh,
you're looking for what's the thing that I can talk to probably any human being about that I know is that they're going to respond to that can help us walk towards truth. And it's the topic of fear.
Mm.
That's what it is. So the negative emotion most of the world is operating in, look at our world. It's not hard to tell. It's just like saying, is this a true statement or not?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what a fear-based world looks like. It looks like it's as far away from peace as you can get because of the fear. Is that our world? That's every city, everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the greatest thing I can help a person with, and the more angry they are, the more fearful they are.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you go into an angry, fearful person and use force on them because they're scaring me, and all the fear and anger just rises like that. So the simplest way in is the number one exhortation in Scripture. It's don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Peace be upon you. Shalom, shalom, shalom. And the culture that we live in will never be able to produce that because of the fear and the false belief.
Can I just say, like, what I really appreciate about it is, like, usually when we do podcasts like this, people feel the need to rise up, right? Or kind of just like, I have to be a certain way because I'm on. But you didn't share a process. You didn't share some protocol, right? Because even in Scripture, like, we see Jesus interact with people in completely different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Right? In completely different ways. So I love the fact that that's how you've learned to show up and receive, but also more give away.
Yeah.
Right, as a more of an important thing.
Yeah, that's for sure. People want I mean, all of us do because we're afraid. We want a certainty. We want to give me the formula. Let me do get the cause and effect down so that it works every time. And then the frustration is it doesn't work.
Yeah,
it doesn't. Nothing in life works that way. But we live in this sort of illusion, lie-based world that says if we just can go to the right seminar and get the right formula. But then when you go to read the Scriptures, there's nothing like that. And so then the Scriptures don't line up with the world that we're really in, and we have to jump through all these hoops to try and make them work. And deep down, we're all like, this isn't not really working.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's a mystery, right? It's the whole thing's a mystery. But when you're talking to a person about fear, there are patterns and processes that are true. And so like another one, just for example, is like a human being can't be angry. It's impossible for a human being to be angry about anything without having experienced a real or perceived injustice. No human can be angry apart from experiencing a real or perceived injustice. So that's just a truth about humans. And the reason that's true is because the only thing God is angry about is injustice. And so it's a God emotion.
Yeah.
And he made humans to never be at rest with injustice. Now, in that anger, he says, don't sin. And your job is not vengeance. Your job is to stop the injustice, right? But what we do is we want to punish somebody who committed the injustice. And so we get all over here and like, let's, lock them up or kill them or whatever, instead of like, let's take away what's causing the injustice. So when I'm talking to an angry person, I like doing this with people because it's liberating to them. When they're upset about something, I'll say, who stole something from you in your life? Who stole? And they stop and they're like, no. Someone stole something. Why are you angry about? Like some injustice occurred. You can't be angry unless an injustice occurred. What I want to know is what was the injustice? And then the injustice is typically for any human is that something was stolen from you. It could be land, it could be money, but it's probably your innocence or your childhood or something like that. And they've never been able to put their finger on the source of that anger.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It's election year, right? And it's so funny you say that because the enemy also likes to make us believe that we're stolen or something or someone stole that doesn't exist, right? And i.e., we have this, both parties, in the U.S. political spectrum, say that the other party stole something from you,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
So lately, God's been sharing, because I've been asking God for His perspective on this, and that is both parties rely on fear, or at least feed fear,
absolutely.
right?
Oh my gosh.
So
yes, right.
when whether you're a believer or not, or a Christian or not, you look at the world. You look at you literally turn on the TV. It's everywhere. Fear permeates.
Yeah.
How do you stay sane?
How do you navigate through that?
Yeah.
Right?
How do you stay sane, especially in the political Israel, Russia, Ukraine?
Yeah.
How do you stay sane in that environment?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. It's a great question because every group is using fear as the motivator to get recruits and converts and all that stuff. That they're going to kill you if they get in power, and they're going to kill you if they get in power. So, so just like any of us would say, so Jesus said, even back in Isaiah, God says, in the world, you are my witnesses. That's what he tells us. You are my witnesses. Witnesses to what? Witnesses to what's true. And so what we have to, the only thing we can do as believers is do what Jesus did. He walked in the middle of all that chaos as an example of what it could be like. Just him. And then he creates this, we call them creative minorities or islands of sanity. And so there's one place, the whole thing can be going down like Paul and the ship in Acts. All the professionals are throwing everything overboard and they're not eating anymore. And they've given up all hope. And this one nutty person thinks he's going to make it. And he's calm and he's at peace. And he's like, I mean, you guys can do what you're doing. You're the pros, but I'm telling you, I'm going to make it to Rome because in my journey, I have to. And if you'll stay with me, you'll make it too. That person that seems crazy at first, when you look around, it's like, he might be the only one that knows what's going on.
Right.
And it just gives an alternative to people. And so if it's one person or six, but Jesus doesn't start movements with 1 million people in a stadium. That's what we think will give us peace. It's these small communities of people saying, we're not going to die. I mean, I was talking to this person from the government, very high level guy who I'm mentoring and coaching. And he said to me, this was a couple of weeks ago, he goes, if you knew what was really going on, you'd be terrified. And I said, no, I wouldn't. What's going on? I'm going to die. And he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, I'm not afraid of that. So no matter what you tell me, I'm not going to be terrified. Then he said, wow, I've never heard anyone say that. There it is. Yeah. That's the witness for the kingdom right there. Yeah. And so just people having a place to go, you know what? I don't know what, but these people right here, they're like at peace somehow. I want, if I know how to be like this, how do I be like that?
Yeah.
And that is just to be that witness. And like Paul Young says all the time, trust the ripple effect of that one thing. Because we think we need a big, massive, just start the ripple. And the reality is, the truth is ripples.
Yeah.
Spread.
Isn't that crazy how like a lot of times fear allows us to take things upon ourselves, right? Like it reminds me of like kind of the Christians who are outside the abortion clinic, right? They're terrorizing these young girls that are terrified.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just almost like, hey, like it's not your purpose to terrorize like these girls that are afraid already as it is.
That's right.
Like you're almost kind of taking vengeance upon yourself.
That's right.
And what I love what you're saying is it allows you to walk in truth, right? Because it reminds you of the scripture when like, the Romans are out there trying to capture Jesus. And Jesus is like, don't you know that if I wanted to, I could call legions of angels and just literally wipe everything out.
That's right.
And I think it's so powerful because he knew the truth of what he was walking in.
Right.
And that's what allowed him to not be afraid.
Right.
So my question to you, Jamie, would be, how do we help people find that truth that they can walk in?
Yeah. So simply, and again, because all of us are the same, and fear is the big indicator. So fear is a very valuable emotion, and no one has the power to make you afraid. No, they can try, but the only one that can make you afraid is you. And so the value of fear is a warning system inside of you that's pointing to something you're going to do or believe about yourself or God that's causing you harm. That's the beauty of fear. Once you we just try and address the fear. Don't address the fear, address what the fear is pointing to. And once you address that, the fear's done its job and it just goes away. So when you're identifying the fear of a person, it's like, tell me what you're afraid of. Don't pray that God takes away your fear, or don't just try and come in and take. What is the fear pointing to? What are you afraid of? We're afraid that if this group takes charge, we're all going to die. We're going to lose everything. We're going to die. So then, okay. So, all right. So then what does that mean you believe about God?
Yeah.
That God can't do anything unless this person's in power or this person's in power. That means God's limited to whoever's in charge.
Right.
Is that true? Is that, and then that kind of like, what if God, so watch, Jesus isn't walking around going, we need a new Caesar. Because if we had a good Caesar, everything would be better.
That's true, right?
He's not interested in that. He's saying, why are we making Caesar God? Right? When God is God. So the fear is always pointing to basically that I believe in the world I'm powerless and alone.
Yeah.
Right. And once I'm powerless and alone, then I've either got to take it all on myself or my team. And once you put that responsibility on yourself, you are never going to be at rest.
And I'm glad you said alone, right? Because how many Christians do we know that secretly believe this? Like they don't know that God truly does love them.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah.
Right? Or like that I'm not worth saving, or that whatever. Like how many? A lot. Yeah, a lot.
And I think that's where it's hard for us to tell the truth is, do you really think God is for you? I mean, I grew up, I didn't ever even think he was for me. I was taught he's mostly not. He's mostly disappointed in you, pretty much,
right?
Yeah, because you're not really making the standard, whatever the standard is, and so it's very difficult. It's very hard for a person to believe that a holy God is for you, and that Jesus is with you, and that the Spirit's in you. And I read a statement the other day. It said, God never began to love you. He's always loved you. There wasn't a time he started. Yeah. It's always been that way. Very hard for us to understand. And another person said, you have to work to be separate from God. To receive God's gift, you just have to receive. And he quoted the verse, for the wages of sin is death. You have to work to get to the place where you're at the point of death like that. But the free gift of God is eternal life. And we think we have to work to get the free gift.
Yeah.
That's how messed up we are.
Yeah. So I want to connect to something I think that's really important for our audience. And oftentimes we are in the finance business, we're in the money business. Jesus uses money a lot in his sermon, and it's very much connected to our heart condition. You can almost tell where that person's at in their heart just by how much or how little they talk about money and how they talk about it. So connecting to the fear, right? Connecting to God's not for me, God's, and being afraid and having this anxiety. Oh, if the Democrats or the Republicans are in charge, this is what's going to happen to money. The primary fear that I see a lot of our audience, especially our clients or students, is that I'm going to run out of money. Right. Especially many of our clients who are in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They're like, I'm going to run out of money, right? Or my 401k is not good enough, or my mortgage is not paid off, or they have a laundry list of things not here, not there. It's things that are not checked off. But for us who follow Jesus, how do we operate in that? Especially in the culture where, you should have your 401k set up, you should have 6 months of savings set up. How do we navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anything's wrong with any of that, of course. Someone asked, we were doing a discussion group, and one of the people in the group said, it's possible that Jesus was quite wealthy. It is. That's a strong possibility that he was extremely wealthy based on the Magi and how much they would have brought, because it would have been a whole caravan. But the thing that's interesting is it doesn't matter if he was super wealthy or poor. he would have acted exactly the
Yeah.
same. I think
Right.
that's the beauty of the whole
That's
thing.
exactly
is like,
right.
so
Yeah.
did it make any difference whether he was, his whole life was financed by, the wealthy women that followed him, or he was dirt poor? It's like he only had one master, as he says, right? You can't serve both of those masters. That's the challenge. You'll either love one or hate the other, or serve
Right.
one and despise the other. So the same question is, if I took away all your money, if you had zero money, what would you be afraid would happen? Like, what would happen? Ultimately, you're always going to get to die. I'm going to die, right? That's always, at some point, I'm going to die in this. But if I took away all your money, like, what is that? Like, what is it that you're afraid of? That, okay, I'm going to be homeless and I'm going to be. So let me just give you a quick example of that. To like put this in the right framework, because it's hard, because we're in a culture that money's a big deal, and you're raised in it's a big deal, and everything's measurement, and and your value as a human is based on how much money you have. So that's hard to like just step out of that and say, don't worry about that, unless you think about it in the right way. And then you can come back to, Jesus said, seek first the kingdom, and all the rest of it will come. Not don't seek that, seek the kingdom. People think, well, if I seek the kingdom, that means I'm going into poverty. That's not what he said. He's talking about food and clothing and all of that when he says, seek first the kingdom and the rest of this will come. That's the principle. So I was asked to be the MC at this event for unsheltered people, homeless people, whatever your terminology is for that. And so they had a big room, and they had, three people that were employed and had homes sat with three people that weren't. And that we're supposed to interact, and I was going to MC that. So we go in there, and I'm sitting at one of the tables, and you talk about two groups of people that have nothing to talk about. I mean, what do you talk about?
Right.
If you're successful or even moderately successful, and you're sitting with people that have no jobs and no homes, we don't even know how to talk.
Wow.
Like, we don't even know what to ask each other. So I'm like, we only know, what do you do? That's out.
Weather's nice.
Where do you live? It's like those topics are gone, and it was silent. So just like our conversation here. So then I went up to like get the room going, and I was like, oh, Lord, what in the world? What would you talk about here if you were here and and in this situation? And so I just said what I said to the room. This is like incredibly uncomfortable. So this is just truth telling, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to stand up and tell the truth. First of all, we're all very uncomfortable, because one part of the table feels intimidated by the other part, but then the other part feels intimidated in another way. And so none of us feel good about this. So we need to find something in common that we have in common. And I just asked the room, what do we have in common? And someone yelled out, love. Wow. And I said, probably the majority of this room doesn't know what love is. Anybody in this room really know what love is. So that's not a topic we can unite on. But what could we unite? What do we all know and understand? And someone yelled out, pain. And I said, yes. Fear. I said, here's what we're going to do at our tables. We're going to go around the table, and each person, I'm just asking you to be truthful. Just share the one thing you're most afraid of in your life right now. Let's just do that.
That's powerful.
So I jumped back at my table and so listen to what people are afraid of. So I started, and I said, I'm afraid, my big fear in life is that I'm a disappointment. Like, I'm saying this thing, I'm really worried about being a disappointment right now. And I'm afraid of disappointing people, because if I disappoint people, then maybe I won't get invited back. The person next to me, who I knew was an executive for a company, said, I'm really fearful about failing at my job, because if I fail at my job, then I might lose my position. Another girl working at some project, she said, I'm afraid, pretty much same thing. I'm afraid of failing at my job. It's a new job, blah, blah, blah. If I lose my job. So that was our fears. Get to the first guy, that homeless, unsheltered guy. And he says, I'm afraid of not having community. He said, because the world I live in, if you fall asleep at night, someone will stab a needle in your neck or take your backpack. He said, but fortunately, I have my buddies here that we take turns sleeping and protect each other.
Wow.
And the next guy said the same kind of thing. Yeah, I'm afraid of being alone. Then this girl all of a sudden bursts into tears, the employed girl, and she goes, I've been afraid my whole life of being alone, and ran out of the room. And the homeless guy chased her down because he knows how not to be alone.
Yeah.
All of us were afraid of losing our possessions.
Yeah.
They were afraid of losing community.
Wow.
So then the table realized, wow, who's here to help who?
Right, exactly.
Right? Because none of us said we sleep at night and my buddy's got my back.
Who's
We don't
really
have-
wealthy?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Real quick, Kitty, are you good with time? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. 'Cause
Yeah.
We didn't want to take away her dinner time.
So in that discussion, the balance was this group will sacrifice community and everything else to have jobs and houses and be lonely.
It's crazy.
And one of the guys that was sponsoring the event, he was at the time he was the president of Nordstrom. He's since passed away. A great guy. I was with him one time out in the islands outside of the San Juan Islands, and we were in this marina, and he were sitting in a restaurant. He was looking at this big yacht, and then there was this little small motorboat. And in the small motorboat, there were 6 people, and they were laughing their heads off and having a great time. And in the yacht, sitting out at the very top of the yacht, was this man by himself in a chair. And my friend from Nordstrom, he goes, what do you think that yacht cost that guy?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know. And he goes, it cost him everything. He goes, look at that boat. That's what he doesn't have. And so the question was at our table was, how do you take that and put it together?
Yeah.
Seek first the kingdom, and all of this.
That's right.
Will be added
and
unto you.
it's crazy too, because the guy in the yacht probably got there for the approval of other people in his life.
Yeah,
But yet never got it and never got the community.
that's right. Yeah. And so the Nordstrom guy was saying, I'd rather be in that little boat with all those guys laughing their heads off than sitting on that big yacht. And so I think that's what Jesus is saying. Don't serve that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't be there, but this is what you really want. You want the community. You want what God wants is community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, what we find to be true, almost all cases where, client students, whatever the case might be, they want something or buy something or have something because of approval of others, right?
That's
To be
right.
loved and to
That's
be
right.
accepted, which is,
Right.
mind-boggling,
Yes.
right? I read a different book, secular book too, but the whole entire premise of the book is people keep up with the Joneses, quote unquote. But a lot of times when others see, a Lamborghini drive by or a Ferrari, they admire the Ferrari, not the guy driving
Exactly.
in it, right?
That's
That's
great.
the twisted irony with
Yeah,
people
that's right.
wanting to have these toys.
That's right. So think if when Jesus says seek first the kingdom, it's
Right.
like, look, get a community. Like,
Yeah.
if you're starting out, find a good community, whatever that is, get a good community,
Mhm.
have brothers and sisters, watch each other back. And then together, start, God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? And how do we become the very best in our vocation that we possibly can become? Not in order to gain from it, but as we're bringing our identity as a gift to the world.
Yeah.
So when that, I can tell you right now that nurse that worked with me, I bet you if you looked at evaluations of them professionally, she was at the top, right?
Yeah.
Because she was seeking the kingdom, but it wasn't making her less of a successful employee. It's
Right.
making her more.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think that's how we help people is to pursue the excellence of the identity that you have. Once you understand that, give that identity to the world at the highest level that you can. And it is rewarded.
Yeah.
There is a reward for
That's
that.
right.
And
On
then you
here
have it
and
all.
eternally.
That's right.
That's great.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Jamie, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it's amazing
My
that you
pleasure.
flew out all this way just to do this podcast and then fly back
I
tonight.
know. That's a long
that's-
trip for a podcast.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's worth it.
Yeah.